I'm Mike,
And I'm Amber. Welcome to the Covenant Chronicles,
where we tell you the truth about relationships.
giving you the tools to build the foundation you always needed.
Welcome back to the Covenant Chronicles.
Hello, everyone.
We, in the first episode there, spent some time kind of explaining a little bit of our background and why we're doing this. And hopefully we can continue that trend of actually providing you guys with information and I guess just substance or content or free stuff to help you out and hopefully help in your life and your relationship.
For sure. Today, we want to talk about trauma and what that looks like and how it can show up in your relationships. It's a fun topic.
Yeah, I guess if that's what you want to call it. Let's start off with I don't like labels, right? We don't like to label things because if you give a label to something, it gives too much validity to it. If you're not careful and you don't have a strong enough hold on your mind and how your mind works and essentially how to control that, giving a label to something can concrete it and make it too big of a part of your identity, right? And that's not to dismiss anything that's potentially happened in your life. We've all had stuff happen in our life. But the flip side to that is that we want to make sure that we're making the future version of yourself your identity and not what's happened in your past as part of your current identity.
Right. So if you're constantly telling yourself that you have trauma or you are a victim of trauma or whatever the case is, then your brain starts to believe that that's all you are, right?
Yeah.
And kind of want to shift yourself out of that thinking because I do think a lot of us, I don't want to say suffered from childhood trauma. I don't feel like that's the right word, but had
some stuff happen.
stuff happen as kids, and it shows up in our body as trauma.
Yeah, I think a good place to start is, if you throw in definition of trauma into the good old Google machine, with AI and stuff now, it spits out some different definitions. So I'll run through those real quick. So it says trauma is a deeply distressing or overwhelming experience that can have a significant, lasting impact on a person's emotional, physical, and social well-being. It can be defined as a physical or emotional injury caused by an external event or force. This includes accidents, natural disasters, violence, abuse, and loss. A subjective experience. What constitutes trauma can vary widely from person to person, depending on their individual factors such as age, culture, and past experiences. An event that overwhelms a person's coping mechanisms. Trauma can cause intense fear, helplessness, and confusion that can be difficult to process and overcome. A lasting impact. The effects of trauma can extend long after the event itself, leading to symptoms such as anxiety, depression, flashbacks, nightmares, and difficulty in relationships. And that's the point in which we want to talk about trauma or address trauma. And what it is how it relates to relationships. So we've all had events happen. And I think that when we talk about trauma, right, this narrative, I guess you could say, or this wokeism, if you will, pushes this thing where it seems like anybody, guy or girl that's had a relationship out there wants to throw the word trauma and say, oh, I had trauma, my ex was crazy, or my ex did this, or my ex was a narcissist, or this, that, and the other thing, right? And we put all these labels on things that people love to use without actually understanding in deep detail what those labels actually mean. And just because somebody had, say, a couple of those boxes that you check for whatever that label is, doesn't make necessarily them that label, if you will. The other thing about it is that with trauma or things that have happened in your past or in your relationships, the script is always being written, right? So everything that you go through, everything that you see, everything that you hear, everything you tell yourself, everything that you're told is written on a page in your mind And how much that affects you will vary depending on the situation, the person, the things that you tell yourself, all those sort of things will all change the way that imprints in your story, if you will.
Yeah. I think it also is important to really understand what your trauma has, I guess, essentially like manifested in your body. Because we can say, oh, I have trauma, but if you don't really know what that actually looks like for you, and how that plays out in your relationships, then you can sit here all day and say, oh, I have trauma, but you're not going to actually be able to fix the problem within yourself to have a better relationship. Because if you don't realize that, someone in the second grade made a comment about your body and then you became self conscious then from that event, and now it still shows up today, but also comes out as jealousy and other things because you are self conscious of yourself and your own body. And so you portray that in other ways to people. Like, you're never gonna be able to fix that within you so that you're not taking it out on your partner.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is part of the trauma narrative or things that you've been through in your life that you need to address, you have to get to the root cause and understanding how those affect you, right? And I think part of that is identifying the levels, right? Like I said, you have this big pendulum in society where, you might have a situation where one person is swearing up and down that their ex did this and they have all this trauma from this past relationship, mostly because, they didn't want to work on their own crap and the relationship was toxic. But on the flip side, you can have things as little as potentially, your partner or your previous spouse or whatever you had saying something seemingly small but consistently, something as simple as you're so annoying, right? When they're frustrated at you. But you do that over and over and over on a consistent basis, say for 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 years, right? And it builds up to where it creates this imprint in you that could be given the label trauma. And I think that that's a place that most people don't acknowledge, especially in society, like with men. Men are supposed to have a different role, and we're supposed to be tough and this and that, and I'm one to talk, right? I'm very hard on men taking responsibility, and with guys that I talk to or guys that I coach, and if there's any sort of, oh, my wife or oh, my partner does that, I'm the first one to cut it off and say, no, 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 what are you doing? Right. But there can also be that side of it where there's lesser identified situations and relationships on both sides of the gender role spectrum where things that we don't think is causing trauma or causing long-term effects can actually affect you. And identifying that and not saying, oh, I'm a victim because so and so said this to me over and over, but just being able to actually identify it and say, hey, this is real. This happened to me. It created this imprint. And now I have to deprogram or unprogram that way of thinking to actually be able to look at things differently and move forward in a different manner. So that way you're not creating potential situations that are harmful for your current relationship, because something like that may manifest in a way where your ex-partner would consistently say, oh, you're so annoying or whatever, and it creates this wound that you don't even realize in your new partner, maybe you guys are being playful and in a joking manner, your new partner goes, oh, you're so annoying, or that's so annoying. And it triggers you. Right. And so being able to identify that trigger as, hey, this is something that happened in my past, and being able to rewrite that and being able to have that conversation with your partner and work through it, and not in a manner of, okay, maybe they have to avoid that forever, but being able to work through that together so you both understand the situation and continue to be playful and not shut down every time you have a trigger from something that was caused by a previous thing from your past.
Yeah, and I think it's important that you are able to talk to your partner about these things, especially when you start to identify them within yourself. Because if you're not telling your partner what's going on and what's happening, then they don't know. Could just assume that, you're upset about something that really, like, if you explained it and they understood, you could work through it together so that it's not something that continues into your relationship. I know for me, like, one of my things that I had to really address and, like, figure out was that I have an issue with plans changing last minute, and I really had to, like, figure out where that came from and why that was an issue, and I had to be able to talk to you about it to understand so you didn't just think that I'm crazy every time something changes last minute and I get frustrated, but
You
it
know,
really came.
the thing about that is though is that I think that's with every woman ever. I have not met one yet that loves plans changing last minute, you know?
Probably, but I think at the end of the day, like, when I can narrow it back down, it comes down to me feeling like, "Oh, you said you were gonna do this, and I was planning on doing that, and now that's suddenly changed," and that creates, like, a sense of frustration in me because 'cause I've, like, built up, my day around whatever that was, thinking that, that was gonna happen, so I think that goes down to really a level of it's hard because I wanna say it's a level of doing what you say you're gonna do,
Mm.
but there are times that, like, plans legitimately change and you just have to roll with it, so me being able to talk to you about that and be like, "This is why it frustrates me," at least allows me to be able to work through that myself when something does happen that I don't have control over.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother, I guess, rabbit hole we could go down of doing the things that you say you're gonna do, and how important that is, especially in the men's role or the masculine role in the relationship. And, I think a lot of men struggle with that for various reasons. Me personally, a lot of it has to do with, I don't know, I guess doctors would call it ADHD. I just call it my entrepreneurial brain, right? It's like, I've got a million things going on, and you only get purview to maybe 100 of those things. I'm trying to sort it out in my brain of what's the best plan of attack, and so I lay out a plan and say, okay, here we go. And then as events happen or things happen throughout the day, it shifts everything around and shakes it up. And it's like, putting it in a shaker cup, putting your pre-workout in there before you go to the gym, and you just shake it all around, right? And now I've got a whole different substance here that I'm pouring out of this cup than what I started with. Is, hey, we got to shift this around, right? But at the end of the day, these are great examples of situations that happen that relationships are going to navigate, that their past can play a part in, right? And identifying what that quote unquote trauma is, or identifying the things that are occurring in their brain, in their emotions and their feelings, and starting to learn to be in tune with their body to actually understand where things came from. And being able to identify the trauma. And I think that us stepping forward and saying, hey, what is this thing? What is this label really about? What does it create? And being able to identify that, right? And whether that's through talking with your partner, through journaling, through self discovery. I mean, those are all things that need to occur inside of the relationship that will continue to progress, not only as individuals, but as a relationship. But it takes stepping back and saying, okay, what is this thing? And what have I had? Right. And also understanding that it's a journey, right?
Mhm,
The discovery of these things that have happened in your past are a journey, right? Our brains are really good at blocking out stuff we don't want to deal with. It's human nature to avoid things we don't want to deal with, right?
mhm.
Whether it's taking out the trash, or it's, something that a family member did to you when you were 8 years old, or this event that happened in your previous marriage, or your dog dying in junior high, or whatever the case may be, right? It's not always the big events, sometimes it's the small things, but our brains are wired really well to basically avoid things if we don't take the reins and control where our mind is going. And so understanding that, and understanding as you grow and as you self-develop and as you learn more about yourself, it's going to continue to unlock the next door and the next door and the next door, to where you're going to find these things more and more and more, but continue to identify what things have happened in your life, what traumas have happened, and how they've affected you, so you can draw a map of your history to continue to build a better future.
I think the most important thing, though, is that you actually have to be open to doing that. Because I think so many relationships get stuck in that's just how you are, that's just how I am, and we don't ever take the time to actually stop and figure out why are you the way that you are? Why are you doing the things you're doing? Why am I doing the things that I'm doing? And I feel like that is the downfall of so many relationships. It's not even that, like, the relationship couldn't have potentially worked out, so much as one or both parties is just refusing to acknowledge or look at themselves or their partner and figure these things out within themselves. Because if you don't take the time to do that and you don't understand why you're doing the things that you do, how is your partner ever going to know why you're doing the things that you're doing? And then how are you ever supposed to have like a deep, meaningful relationship if you don't understand each other? And you're just constantly fighting about things that you don't even know why you're fighting about them.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's amazing, like when you map the um progression of our relationship and through the past and the history of our relationship, the progress that has occurred in that realm. And I believe it's because of a level of curiosity that we have within each other to not only figure ourselves out, but figure out each other and figure out what makes the other person tick, right? And understanding what makes them tick. And it's a massive, would you say, a tool or a massive advantage, I guess you could say, in our relationship that has allowed us, not to say we haven't been without our problems, because we've honestly overcome some huge things that should have broken our relationship apart. And what's so interesting about it is every one of those things that should have broken us apart has actually brought us closer together, right? And part of that, of course, is our faith and the fact that we put God at the center. But the other side of it is really the curiosity of what makes us tick, right? And even if we aren't agreeing or we disagree, or we're not seeing eye to eye, it doesn't take us long to reconcile with every, I feel like actual, I guess, genuine argument you could say that we have. Those times to reconcile has become shorter and shorter and shorter, to where we almost catch it as it's starting now, not to say we're perfect and we don't let things carry on too long, but those things in our past, as we've learned about each other and we've been curious to figure out these traumas and making these decisions, I guess, to continue to learn about ourselves and the other person, it's created this situation where we can see these traumas, if you will, or these past events play out, right? And
mhm.
the things that you say or the things that I say and how we react to things, and we can see this play out, and it gives us an understanding of saying, if I do this, or if I've said this and I see you react in whatever way that is, I can actually say, okay, well, I triggered her because of this. This has happened in her past. And also, I said what I said because this has happened in my past. So we can continue this cycle and we're going to let things spin out of control. Or we can say, hold on, let's take a break for a few minutes here because we both triggered something from our past. Let's take a second. Let's breathe. Let's try to actually think about what the other person is saying and figure out what direction this conversation is actually going and what direction it needs to go, and then get to a resolution rather quickly from that point.
Yeah, and I think we've come to figure out too that a lot of times we're arguing about the same thing. Like we're saying the same thing, just in two different ways, like your way and my way, which really is like logical versus emotional. But at the end of the day, we're saying the same thing. We want the same conclusion. It's just because we're saying it slightly differently, the other one is triggered by it. And
Mhm.
so,
Oh, and don't worry, we'll do a whole episode on actually listening to your spouse. And men, this is mainly geared towards you because we're really good at listening, but we're not good at actually hearing. There's a difference, and we'll get into that in a whole nother episode here.
well, and when we're in the middle of arguments, like women are very emotional. We're not working off of logic, and men work off of logic. And so when you bring some logic stuff up, we don't want to hear it. We're already in an emotional state. That's not going to help. Yeah, we'll go into that at a different time. I think overall, at the end of the day, like there's a lot more that we can go into with trauma, but I think that the main point and thing that we really want to talk about and like make a point of in this episode is that like you have to be curious and open to it and figuring out yourself in order to grow your relationship. Because if you don't, like, your relationship really is doomed to fail. And that will continue repeating relationship after relationship after relationship until you decide to stop and actually fix the problem, really.
Yeah, 100%. And that's, I think in the next episode, I really want to dive deeper into how to navigate that and what that looks like and, give some examples that maybe we're not so proud of and then some examples of how we did it effectively, because I think that that's one thing that we said in the first episode and I think continues to ring true is there seems to be this stigma around people navigating successful relationships where this facade is put on and not always intentionally, right? It's just sometimes the journey wasn't grafted or the journey wasn't, I guess, there for everybody to see in the early stages when it was hard, when it was difficult, when things weren't what they should have been, when things by all measures shouldn't have worked, right? And how people fight through that and get to the other end. I was just actually listening to the wife of somebody I follow and have for many years, and they were talking about just that of, we got to this point in our journey where people started to be able to see us started here. But our real journey started, years prior. And that part was never broadcast. It was never talked about. It was never, we were so caught up in the trenches, if you will, that that part wasn't shown, right? And so I feel that a lot of times people go, oh, I've been through this, I've been through that, I have this issue, I have this issue or that issue. And, you wouldn't understand because you've never dealt with that. And the truth is that people that are in a successful place, and anybody that you look up to or you follow or whatever have you has been through so much crap typically that that's what got them there, right? It's not that they just woke up one day and everything was hunky dory,
Right.
So at the end of the day, you know, identifying the trauma, as Amber said, and being able to be curious and having that passion for being curious about what makes you tick and what makes your partner tick makes all the difference. And rolling into the next episode, I want us to get further into that and actually identifying how to navigate these things and the things that we've done and the things that we've learned not to do along the way on how to actually navigate this and how those traumas show up in some of the traumas that we've experienced.
I think that sounds awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. Look forward to having you in our next episode.
Yeah, hopefully we didn't bore you too much. Catch you next time.
Bye, guys.